what are you navigating, Raven?
Navigating this week. First of all, I'm just so happy to be back in fellowship. It's becoming this is not what I'm navigating, but it has become such a beautiful thing to do this each week. So much so, y'all don't know this, but you could probably picture it like throughout the week. We're like, oh, this, sending voice notes and saying stuff. Like it feels like I guess it literally is an outlet, but it's more than just entertainment or like creating entertainment. Even I love that we get to create entertainment-ish, I guess if we can call this, but via the things that we love to do anyway. And it feels like such a reprieve to be able to process stuff out loud weekly. So anyway, but navigating the semester has come to an end, and I
Thank
will
the
update
Lord.
saga. I got my paper back.
Oh goodness. A, B's.
97, period.
Period.
No, but my professor sent me an article, and essentially the essence of the email, in an email, it was just like, it was, great to have you in class. Like, here's some things so that you can really stretch your understanding of Roman slavery. I don't know what the topic was about, but it was Roman slavery, blah, 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 and how people try and whitewash biblical slavery so as to find a way to condemn modern day slavery. But anyway, or modern day meaning in the 19th century in American slavery. And I was like, and my argument was essentially, we don't have to do that. We don't have to whitewash biblical slavery in order to make this one. You could just say, no, slave is bad, and we just shouldn't do that. But they do that sometimes to absolve themselves of feeling bad. And that seems like a warped way to do it, but trust me, that's why they do it. Anyway, and so all that to say, he sent me all these articles about biblical slavery and how I was off the mark. And what I was getting at, though, was all of his comments were all like, it wasn't grammatical errors. It wasn't even historical ones, even though he would try and paint them like they were. It was like, well, this person says this about that. Okay, well, that's one source. And then this one says that. So what do we do? It's about a value of sources. And you just made, baby, because I did Morgan. Shout out to Morgan, Liberation Theology. What's his name?
James Cone.
James Cone. I referenced James Cone. I couldn't do it towards the end because his really aren't like they're more like in opinion, which is fine. And in a research paper, you really got to do whatever. But I put him at the end so he could know. Just put that little stamp. This is where I stand. I made sure it was relevant. So anyway, I know that's why a lot of his critiques or pushbacks, and that's why he couldn't give me an inaccurate, like a bad grade, because I keep telling people this is probably one of the best papers I've ever written in my life, humbly. And I'm saying that like I look probably one of the best papers I've ever written because I made sure. Sometimes I'll be just like throwing sources in just to do a little do. No, this time, baby, I read so much to get this paper done, and yeah, I got a good grade. All of that to say.
So essentially, what you did was write a paper and you justified your argument correctly with your sources. And only thing he could do is argue back, which he can do in another paper. Right. Because that's what academics do. You did what the assignment was and had to send you an article and say, I said don't write the paper. But you did it and you did it well. So good for you.
I appreciate you framing it like that because I think that's how I've been trying to, and I just haven't found the words. But yeah, right. So we're now we're not because I'm done.
Right.
We're in an academic rigor right now. We were, and I'm sure he was reading it and he stopped last thing because it was like 12 pages. Girl, it was only supposed to be. It was supposed to be like 2,000 words. Girl, that thing said at least 4. But he was though. But girl, you could tell I had like 4 pages to go. He stopped because he was commenting a ton. He stopped commenting. It was like 4 pages. He just did.
You got me beat.
I said, okay.
Stumped.
Anyway.
Good job.
Thank you. So that's semester is done. I am free
to relax.
until till June. I got Hebrew in June. Okay. What are you navigating, darling?
I concur with being able to release in this space, and I really do enjoy it also, like being able to have space to converse in community, mainly with you, because I obviously talk directly with you, but our listeners too. Like, I did go out last night. Y'all, this is an impromptu conversation. I was out of town. I went to San Diego for a trip for work. Please forgive me for my man yelling on the game. That y'all will hear that in the recording. But we are 2 parents trying to navigate our passions at the same time.
Right. That is y'all doing your passions at the same. That's hilarious.
In the same space.
We're a passionate house.
I don't even have on makeup, so and I can't do the glasses right now. But what was I saying? I went out last night and I took Frederica with me. Mom was like, we came back on Friday.
Oh, okay. That's Saturday.
And Mom was like, you took her to a bar. I was like, well, when you put it that way, I guess I did. And I did take her to a bar. But to be fair, me and my friend Alexis were only supposed to go out to a restaurant, but the restaurant was we was going to a brewery. But
It was at Restaury. Yeah, I went he took us to a brewery.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I was taking. It was very obviously a very. It was a very impromptu decision to go out with us today, and we were gonna go to a restaurant, but it looked like it was too popping for a baby. And then the brewery didn't have nobody in it, so we went to this bar.
Have a partner, please.
They did not. They did not mind either. Like I bring the whole stroller in and everything, and it was like so like funnily embarrassing. It like, felt like we was in a movie because like I was like I literally just rolled this baby in a jogging stroller. There was like a group of guys over here, and then a group of girls at the bar, and you could tell they. I don't know if they knew each other, but it felt like they was flirting with each other, like the group. And I was just kind of like, these folks out on a Saturday night having a single time best life, and I'm in here with like a whole child. It was not even one yet, like just out and about at 10, 11 o'clock. And yeah, but we had a great time. My friend Alexis said that she loves the podcast. And I was like, thank you so much for the support. I actually said I was going to say that at the What the Girl's Saying, but here we are. What I'm actually navigating is I don't know if I'm actually navigating this, but I did just come back from San Diego. We all went, baby. That free flight with the baby can sit on your lap. That's cute. And today like to walk. And Frederica can walk. And I mean, she wants her freedom. And a flight across country with a baby who wants to walk is not fun. So luckily on our last flight, we were trying to be strategic on all the flights and pick seats where we didn't pick a middle seat and hope that nobody would sit with us. And somebody did except everybody did except the last flight. Oh, the last leg of the race, we didn't have somebody in between us, and that was perfect because I don't think we was gonna be able to handle another person with Nyla with Frederica in our midst.
I got you.
Yeah. So yeah, I went to another conference gathering, topical gathering on sexual assault, and that was that. So professionally, got to go on another trip to learn more about my subject area. And personally, we are in the home stretch on this home buying process. And I'm so excited. So excited. So
I'm so
excited.
excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes me happy. Oh my god, just to tell you, because you are now a profession in the home buying process. Oh girl, my daddy called me about some personal, like some home buying. Girl, I actually got to tell you this offline, low key. But anyway, but long story short, we can talk more about it later. But the point is, he like do home stuff, and
Hmm.
it was like only for like an investment thing. But this
Hmm.
was my first time, like girl, the devil. So let me say it this way, 'cause I'll tell the whole story later. Home buying, when I give her props, guys, and you've seen in previous episodes, I've given her props for this, obviously because of the historic piece, which we've talked about, why it's so significant for Black couples, Black families to own her, like how beautiful all that is historically. But also, baby,
Process.
why they do that? It shouldn't be that. Like, in part, I'm like, oh, I get it because it's a serious thing. And in part, I'm like, supremacy. Because period, it's so much. Like it's so much. And I was just like, I don't first of all, even the crediting check thing, her migo thing, yeah. He was like, oh, it's gonna require he was like, I was like, period. Girl, and it's not even that the distance between which my FICO score was from my credit, whatever, like what I thought is my credit score, is sickening. And probably I'm being
Mhm.
way too transparent right now, but my point is, we'll see if I edit all this out. I'm actually not. I don't care. But my point is, it was just so many layers to just the conversation. Like I had only got to and I said, never mind, I don't want to. Never mind, not yet. Like it's too much. And then talking about, oh, it could potentially be 20% down. Now that is supremacy.
Yeah. Mhm.
No, ma'am. No,
But
ma'am.
there's other options though, because we definitely not putting 20% down on Jack.
That's like, I mean, it's the loans, right? Conventional FHA, but because it was going to be an
Yeah.
investment property, it was not going to
Right.
be
You
able to
had
be
to do the 20%. Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And so, and that's another. And I stupidly, girl, in my pre-application, I made some rookie mistakes. Talking too much. I should have just been like, either give me the money or don't. But here I go. Yeah, I'm just trying to do a new thing, and I'm trying to get it. They don't care about all of that. Stop talking. Anyway, all of that to say, Morgan
I
gets beat
mean,
up because
the route though, you can live there for 2 years with an FHA loan and then rent it out.
thought it was 5, but you
So
mm,
technically, it might be a little longer because they don't want you to do that. Ooh, please don't take any advice from me because I know nothing. But if you can like justify, like you bought a house and then maybe you got a job in another area and you need to buy another house. But it's like, well, I already have this house now and I can afford this second house. I'm gonna just rent this first house out. So they don't really want you to do that, but it's an option with that
well,
eviction loan.
government officially, I would never do anything like that. If things were to happen in that sequence, it would never be preemptive. I'm just legitimately
Right,
thinking
never.
out loud. That's all.
Also supremacy because I'm sure black people didn't think of this first.
Also,
Also,
no, and I truly, if like I'm being hyperbolic and also not in the sense of the language, the documentation, the capital required. I just learned about something
yeah.
called lien insurance. Like
Mm,
in the event that you buy a house that essentially had a lien on it from
yeah,
somewhere else, and then now but you're already knee deep in the process, the insurance
right.
essentially protects you if you're already knee deep in. But again, the insurance be like 1,000 plus. Who?
Mhm,
Who? If I just tried to save up my little last little pennies for the 20%, and then they be
right.
watching your money on it like a hawk. Like
Mhm.
who? Who? Never mind. Her go. Count me out. Count me out.
Oh, yeah. The money for the inspection that's on top of the 20%. Yeah. It's
Count
not
me out.
yeah.
But they say put a hand down. If you Anyway, so that's why we big her up, guys. I'm glad we had that little diatribe right there because that's why we big up homeowners. That's why
Yeah,
the girls who do the work, get the process done, who are able to go through that rigorous of like a introspective dive into all your stuff and still be like, I'm fighting on. Girl, God bless you, because that's a level of vulnerability that, woohoo. Yeah. Shout out
yeah.
to y'all.
And I will also say, again, we would not be in this space if we didn't take a step back and live with family and sacrifice a couple years to do it. And I feel like if you have the space that we don't have the ability always as a people to like do that and like
Yeah.
save up that 20 10 to 20 or 3 to 5% to 20% without having to take a step back. And of course there are first time home buyer programs that you can go
Incentives
through
are.
that bring you straight to home buying as well. But if you don't want to go that route and you do want to save the money, you might have to take a step back and do something that you might not want to do. That's not as traditional. That's not social media pretty. In order to save the money to get where you need to go, work on some debt, work on some paying off things.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah, that's true too. That's true T. Cause
now,
no, that's true T. Cause yeah, did you have years of like, man, I would have loved to stay in this, or I'm sure it's wonderful high rises where y'all are, or everything. But like now, the girl is in the high rises, and y'all finna sit down and kick up and have a nice fat investment. Like what a
yeah.
beauty. Truly, it's pros and cons. It really, yeah,
Yeah, and for the realistic, there we go, words.
yeah,
The realistic view is that you've saved up this money for the down payment, for the inspection. I feel like we had to pay for something else too that is was big and I forgot. But you had to save up for all this, and then you also got to save for furniture. So if you come over to our house and we just have a couch or a kitchen table that somebody gave us, stay down, don't say nothing, okay? Because we're home, and there's steps and there's levels to this, and I'm actually okay with that because me and Desmond are very much like perfectly okay with not trying to keep up with the Joneses.
absolutely,
We could care less about running up our credit or going out and just buying everything on credit. We would much rather see the money in our bank account than to have to pay somebody. So if we got to do it slowly, we're going to do it slowly.
absolutely. No, no comment there. And on that note, yes, because half of everybody living off credit cards, anyways. Like, how much of it a flex is it a flex anyway? So yeah, shout out to that. Yeah,
Yeah, but we will talk about homeownership a little bit deeper and going against the grain for that a little later
yeah.
after we say
Maybe, you know what? We should start doing like after hours. Maybe it's one day, like for things like that. Like, cause like I
yeah.
don't feel like it's necessarily directly pertaining to the podcast, but if people
Mhm.
ever wanted to like delve into just our thoughts about stuff, like that may be
Yeah.
a cute look. Cause I got some thoughts actually about orange, but
Yeah, yeah. So we are always giving space to the nuance, and we want to talk about and talk through social issues that impact Black women. So, Raven, what is on the agenda?
Today, oh, actually, let me switch energies for real because the week, again, that's why y'all, we really be checking in with each other throughout the week because, I mean, with regard to the topic and the subject matters sometimes, but anyway, because sometimes they be heavy and deep and dramatic and so much. And we have to be like, sometimes we just like, let's just pop on camera. But then sometimes we're like, we should probably talk about this first. And this was definitely one of those weeks because if you have been paying attention and you're not living under a rock, or even if you, whatever, in the pop cultural and socio-cultural zeitgeist right now, there's a lot of drama. And when I say drama, I mean abuse. And when I say
Right.
abuse, I mean abuse in regard to assault and abuse towards women, domestic and
Black women.
otherwise, or interpartner violence. Right, right,
Mhm.
right. And it's just been a lot of conversations about that this week, especially in the Black community, because right? It's four, Cassie, Hallie,
Like,
Meg. I think
what
that's
was the
it.
last one? What was the one you said?
Oh, and
Cassie.
then that
Cassie, Meg.
yeah. So we said three, and then the reason I said four is because that video, which we'll reference in a
Yeah.
second. But anyway, it's just been all of those stories have
Sorry.
been resurfacing. I'm not going to necessarily go into the details of them
Mhm.
because everybody knows it. And I just gave the name. If you happen to be the one person that doesn't know it, just for reference, if you want to look up the stuff now, you can. Nevertheless, abuse has been the subject matter of the week, and it's been a really heavy week. Not just because we've been watching abuse get re-drugged out into the social conversations, more so specifically because I'm watching Black women consistently be gaslit with regard to their
Mhm.
experiences, with regard to the real life abuse that so many Black women experience in our personal lives and otherwise. And not just physical, if I'm really being honest, but the condescension and the vitriolic responses towards women, even bringing up mildly some of their experiences with their partners. And so if I'm being honest, the exhaustion for me has just been like, why are we acting like we don't all see this on a level, on micro
Mhm.
levels in our own worlds? Like, are we really joking? And then how somehow Black women referencing abuse publicly or otherwise gets turned into gender wars. Wait. Why is it not abuser versus non-abuser?
Right.
Why is it Black men versus Black women? And how these worlds intersect? I mean, I get it, and I guess that's what we'll be fleshing out a little bit throughout the conversation, even though that isn't the center. But the point is, if you feel exhausted this week, I do just want to take a second and say, let's take a beat and take a breath. I apologize that we're talking through it, but I assure you that we're doing it not for the salaciousness of the fact that it's pop culture stuff or pop culture noise, but because this is a Black woman centric podcast. And I don't know if you have stats on Black women's abuse, but it's chaotic and it's a mess. And we need to talk about it. And more specifically, we want to talk about some of the things that feel like second nature around abuse and women's relationships with their partners. Some of the things that we feel like are second nature about, like, well, avoid these things, or don't necessarily talk to a partner like this, or when you experience this, then you should probably walk away. It may feel second nature, maybe to us because we're a little bit older and maybe have experienced things or lived or whatever. But the truth is, so much of what we're seeing play out this week is truly a manifestation of how some of the truths and knowledge around domestic violence and inter-partner violence, especially in the Black community, isn't as second nature as we thought that it is, or sometimes that we take for granted that it is when it's actually not. And I think we need to heighten our conversations around this stuff and not just treat this moment as a pop cultural moment. So I hope that was a pretty good synopsis. What do you think, Morgan? Anything to add there?
Yeah, I actually I want to go ahead and just put this out there for statistics. And I'm actually going to reference a organization that I actually met some of these people within the last two conferences that I've been in or gatherings. And this is our sister's house in Washington. They have on their website that more than 40% of Black women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, according to the Institute of Women's Policy Research, Status of Black Women in the United States. A report from the National Center of Victims of Crime found that 53.8% of Black women have experienced psychological abuse, while 41.2% of Black women have experienced physical abuse. Majority of the time, those go hand in hand, especially with like psychological comes before the physical. And then, more disturbingly, Black women are 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by men than white women. It didn't say by Black men; it says by men. Period. Now, if we want to do the statistics on Black women experiencing sexual violence, which is more disturbing, but I know it off the top of my head, but I want to make sure I'm correct.
No, please. Yes. Yeah. We're going to take our time on this episode too, if you can't already tell. So, no, please.
Black women are disproportionately at risk for sexual violence, and 1 in 5 Black women are survivors of rape. 41% of Black women experience sexual coercion and forms of unwanted sexual contact. For every a black woman who reports sexual assault or rape, at least 15 do not. And also for the context of this conversation, I work in sexual assault and prevention and education and interpersonal violence prevention education. And main thing that I think we don't realize is that we don't know what sexual assault is, and we also don't know what even with this conversation, part of what Raven was saying was that people just don't know what abuse is. So that was part of what Raven was saying is that as a culture, some of this has been normalized because we don't actually know what abuse looks like. We don't know what coercion looks like. I think a big part of the conversation that I keep hearing with Cassie is you trying to prove coercion, but you also with coercion is power. With sexual assault, there's power. For example, the whole issue with film producers being arrested for sexual assault and things of that nature is because you cannot give consent when you have a level of power over somebody, because at all times in the back of their head it's going to be playing out, could I do this without any repercussions.
Mhm.
So, for example, with the conversation around Cassie, I was listening to a podcast with Desmond, and that was a conversation is like, can you prove coercion? No, because you don't know when the power struggle started. You don't know when the relationship truly switched, probably from producer, music artist to anything beyond that. So that's gonna be hard to like. Well, I don't like this conversation.
Really?
It's so deep. No, because
But
it's
it,
very a nuanced conversation. It really is.
it
Because
is.
a lot of times we want things to be black and white and they're not. I
Yeah.
think a good
I got a
rule
good
is
framework to help us do it too. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. I think what a good rule is though, if you have power over somebody, you have to be careful of how you like those waters are already skewed. That's why there are policies in place in companies that you cannot date your superior, right? And if you do date somebody in your company, you must disclose it to HR. Like this is why those things are there, because you never know how power is being played. And when I keep saying power because um sexual assault is about power, not about sex. Domestic violence also is about power. I think there's the will of abuse, and all these psychological, physical, emotional, all these financial, all the abuses are all a part of the will of abuse. At the center of the abuse will is power and control. So there's there's no way you can separate financial abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and I'm going to read them all. Economic abuse. You can't separate all of this from power and control. There's a desire for power and control.
Absolutely.
So I think that's where I'll center the conversation. Um,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I
No,
don't.
I appreciate that. Actually gives good because I'm glad that you did it because I'm going to give us like a really basic framework to build into all of that. So I'm glad that you named all of that. So now you guys have a good kind of crux of where we'll be going. We'll get a little bit personal. Obviously, we're going to have the statistics because this is Morgan's space and this is the area that she literally professionally works in. And then we're going to hopefully reason and reckon with you guys in a way that touches your hearts and helps us to further and advance this conversation. Because again, I don't want this to be a pop culture moment, not on this
Yeah.
podcast or even elsewhere, because I know it's become that. And a lot of toxic people who are also victims of patriarchy, which we're going to get into in a second, are
Mhm.
making it this because we're so used to cavalierly engaging with abuse to the extent that now it literally just feels like a them versus this. Like X versus Y. Like it's like, bro, we gotta chill. So we're gonna trek these scary waters so that hopefully we can make calm the waters in the conversation moving forward.
And you were saying, quick, you were saying that like it becomes a gender wars, and I think that's because I think I also wanted to say this when I was thinking about preparing for this conversation. I love men sexually and non-sexually. That is as a womanist, that is part of I ain't gonna say the oath I took, but that is part of the framework that I sit in is that womanist, black from the Alice Walker's definition, loves black men either sexually or non-sexually. So I am coming from a place of love in that black
Absolutely.
men and men in general are victims of patriarchy.
Yes.
So Go ahead.
I was gonna say, can we start? That was where I was about to. Can we actually pause and start there? Because I think that's a part. That's where I really want to start this. You
Yeah.
freed me this week, Morgan. And when I say freed me, meaning like you gave me a sounding board to start this conversation in my own brain so that we could do it publicly.
Yeah.
She said this week, guys, and I'm gonna paraphrase, so then obviously like fix it where I error. But she said to me, in the same way that women are victims of patriarchy, men are also victims of patriarchy differently, obviously, because there are different
Mhm.
gendered implications, but ultimately we're all victims of it. And at a high level, this is when she first said it. I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense. I hear that all the time because men have to all that working and all of that stress that they put on themselves to perform and to compete and to be higher than the next man is all implications or consequences rather of patriarchy. So when I think about a man being victim of patriarchy, my mind immediately goes to economically. But
Mhm.
then, as we're having a conversation this week about assault and the ways that that's impacted women, specifically this week, when she said it, I think you were making the case that patriarchy demands that there is a dominant figure in a relationship.
Right.
And when that is a demand, when that is a necessity of partnership, then all of these consistent cases of inner partner abuse becomes almost inevitable. Because if we keep telling somebody that you are the head, then when somebody bucks up against a head, of course, you're going to push back on them and outright abuse them in many instances. And that's what we're seeing, not just this week. Again, it's heightened this week, and then it's heightened the emotions of every regular person, if you will, because we're all in this little horrible little box of called patriarchy, and
Right.
we're all feeling our personal experiences with it. But yeah, you're gonna buck up against it every single time when there is a requirement that somebody be at the head, and then and then you try and buck up against or push back. You're like, girl, don't you know I'm the head, or person, whoever?
Right.
Don't you know
Right.
I'm
Right.
the head? Let me destroy you. That's what we're seeing. So at a very low level, let's if you want to give thoughts there, I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think so. My disclaimer that I love men and especially
Yeah.
black men because I see them again as victims of the very system that they are also victims of. Like they're victims of the system that is telling them that they have to perform a certain way. And reading Patriarchy is for Everybody by Bell Hooks, she talks about how black men or either the men or black men she spoke to, they didn't want to perform in this way, right? But they don't have any other options. So you ask, how does it come into gender wars? And it becomes gender wars because men are trying to grapple with the system that they are in. It's a fine line between patriarchy and abuse, but I think patriarchy is a straight setup for abuse, right? So if patriarchy tells me that I must be the head of the household, right? I must be the person who makes the money and the provider. That's what patriarchy tells me, right? When I get so stuck into this gender role, it is a quick pipeline to get me to abuse, right? So a part of the power and control wheel is using economic abuse, preventing her or somebody from being able to get a job because I'm the man. You stay home and you birth the children, right? You stay home and you take care of the home, the role. So yes, it gets really it turns into gender wars because they can probably see that some of the things that all these men of the news are doing are tied up in roles that they are supposed to also be performing. So that they are seeing themselves in the people in the news. I'm gonna say a less nuance, but it's still nuance. Tory Lanez, he's a man. He's supposed to be out here. The role of patriarchy, the role of a man is I spread my seed, I conquer the woman. You know what I'm saying? But easily that can turn into drama and somebody getting hurt, right? So it's like, well, Meg shouldn't have did this, and that, or Kelsey shouldn't have did blah, 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 blah. And because as a man, you see, well, I was told that I'm supposed to go out and conquer the women. So it's macho when I'm out here sleeping with Kylie, Kelsey, and Megan, right? But when the drama happens, now the blame is not on Tory Lanez. So the blame is no longer on Tory Lanez because he is doing what he's supposed to do according to patriarchy, which is go out and f as many women as he possibly can. But the blame now is on the women. Why y'all like y'all doing what y'all doing, fighting over men, or who shot her? When we start, I don't even know if that was a good example,
It was
but
actually perfect. You know that was perfect. Go ahead.
the point I'm trying to make is that I believe that men can see themselves just a little bit in any of these situations, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, I wouldn't have did this, you wouldn't have crossed the line to abuse, but at the same time, patriarchy, while it is abusive in, I think, abusive in nature,
So it
we
is.
have come to grips with the fact that there is still a line of abuse and that the majority of men don't cross that line, but they can see themselves where they would have still, like, this is still okay over here because it's patriarchy, it's what we're supposed to do, and you shouldn't have did that over there. But they can see themselves in the men, right? Listeners, I hope
No,
it makes
Morgan, I promise, don't question yourself. You like seriously, because you've given me so much good stuff. Because and you're also actively answering thoughts that I've been having with guys this week or queries that I've been presenting to guys this week. Because let's actually pause there too. I want to really pace it. So many men see themselves in this. That's why
sense.
it's so much. And you know what? I'm gonna give them that actually. Because in the same way, so many Black women have seen themselves in these instances too. We can very
Right.
easily recall a situation where maybe it didn't rise to Cassie's level. Some did, but
Mhm.
definitely to the extent of like, girl, yeah, I remember being in that relationship and being like, girl, how the heck I want to leave, but I can't. I want to kiss. I don't really want to kiss him, but he's already standing here. But like everybody has something, some modicum of experiences of either one or all of the women's experiences. And so in that, I can absolutely see instances where men have also found themselves, icky or not, in some sort of a situation similar to one of the men, the various men that have been brought up this week,
Mhm.
to the extent that they have empathy. Because just the same as we can see varying degrees of ourselves throughout the women's stories this week, I'm sure they could also see the same varying degrees. And so, yeah, let's say this first, so we can try and cool down some of the rhetoric. I mean, I can see a world where just the same as all girls aren't saying, I am Cassie, every guy is not saying, yeah, let Diddy off because I am Diddy. I can see the variations in all of it and how you can feel that empathy because of the varying degrees within this conversation. And so, as we're talking to each other, as much as I've been getting frustrated, I really have been trying to see underneath rather than to see what's on top. Yeah, I know I say that a lot. And so I'm like, okay, what are you saying? I know you're not saying you Diddy. I know you're not saying you condone it, but what am I hearing you say? And if I can just flesh out some of the arguments, going to what you were just saying a minute ago, some guys are saying that, I mean, when a woman gets frustrated, take out Diddy and Cassie actually, because that's a little too dramatic. But since you brought up Tori and Meg, you ever been going back and forth with a woman and she popping off at the mouth and she belittling you and y'all back and forth and then y'all start wrestling and tussling? Those moments do get chaotic and they get harsh and they get scared, whatever, to the extent that that male ego and that testosterone becomes overly rampant and crosses the line into abuse. And we can all unequivocally say it's abuse, but what I've heard from guys is that, yeah, but it crosses the line at that point. But right before it reached that line, it was a tussle, it was a wrestle, it's a back and forth. It's a men and women do be getting into some heated stuff. And in that, I'm saying what I feel like you're saying is essentially that what patriarchy does is one, it blurs that line. It blurs
Mhm.
that teetering line and it almost necessitates chaos in our relationships because again, we're in that back and forth fight for power and battle for power. And so what the men are seeing, going to your point, is they see themselves because the patriarchy has blurred that line. And also they feel like because they resonate and see it so much or see themselves so much to whatever varying degree, it's like, well, what's the big deal? What's the problem? And that's where I wanted to move to next, which is, guys, just because it's common,
Right.
it's wrong. And we can, and so I think we can, so let's do it here. Let's do it here. Yeah, you probably see a varying degree of yourself in Tori or whomever, can name all the names. And so I hear that and I'll raise you one and say, and I'm still saying it's wrong. So, but this, I'm not him, but okay, fine. You maybe not be. Who knows? Okay. Even if you do, it's wrong.
Desmond gets on my nerves all the time. I get on Desmond's nerves when I talk about the patriarchy all the time. Patriarchy is power. Male privilege is power, and it's actually part of the power and control wheel. Male privilege, but patriarchy is the in self power, and abusing power is a form of abuse. But like you just said, like we tussle, but then there's a line we don't cross. But even in that, like tussling, that ego getting puffed up, that is when you are probably also trying to prove yourself as a man. You know what I'm saying? Still trying to say, I'm still a man, I'm right, blah, 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 right? And I think when I say that men are also victims of patriarchy, like bell hooks, echoing that is that you have another option to live, right? Like for me personally, I don't want to see my man working by the toil of his brow, just because he's a man, right? But when you are in love with somebody, you don't want to see them victim of a system that is telling them you must be the only person working, right? While women are also fighting for the right to rest and not be the one, like, okay, so I was thinking about this. Like, I don't understand why, and it's probably the ego. Like, I don't understand why men are like, I don't like actually being the one to work. Men are more of a victim to, and I'm not saying work, definitely work. I'm saying the super extreme macho of women ought to be able to use their minds and get into the workplace, and men are not fighting for rest. Does that make sense? Like, you can start a movement to say, like, actually we shouldn't have to, work 57,000 hours to be the ones to be the providers, right? And I think that has to do with debunking the gender roles, but that's probably never going to happen because how inflated patriarchy is and the lack of wanting to release some of that power and control. And it's just like whiteness. Like, it's just like whiteness. You have to realize that the two men is to women is white is to black.
Yeah, 100%.
In order for men to have some of these revelations and power movements of resistance, they have to give up some of the power that they hold. And the thing is, they one have to recognize that they have the power. Oh, are we talking about white people? We have to recognize that they have the power in order to release the power. And yeah, that's all I'll say right
No,
there.
James Cone said in the book, I was reading what the book you told me to read about the liberation. I can't never think of the name of it, but
Got
it's
it
about
first?
liberation. Huh? Yes, thank you. He said, well, in the revised version, because the '80s
Mhm.
version, he was a little rough, but in the revised version, he literally said he regrets not acknowledging sexism as the scourge that it is, and he was like, any black male theologian that wants me to take them seriously with regard to their argument for around white people and white theologians racism or whatever, he was essentially saying, if you don't take this one serious, I can't take your argument serious, and you shouldn't expect no white person to take your arguments
Mm.
serious either if you don't take the argument of sexism serious. So anyway, just validating that. Yeah, he said the same thing. How much do you feel like gender roles this when it comes to abuse, patriarchy, I'm just review. Patriarchy is
Mhm.
almost it don't create abuse, but it creates the pathway for it. When you talk about
Right.
domination versus time, okay, patriarchy creates a pathway towards abuse, and it sets up the stage for it more like effectively. And so because of
But I do
that,
think it's an abusive system, though, like racism.
okay. Patriarchy is you saying. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's no, actually I agree. No, I don't disagree. Sorry. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I don't I'm just saying I don't know if patriarchy automatically means like if you were born into patriarchy, you will be abusive to your partner. That's I think what I'm getting at. Like
Right.
meaning physically abusive. But yeah, I think it is by its nature like an abusive system, so of course
Right.
it could potentially and very often does create environments of abuse anyway. But I'm saying that to say, how much does gender and biological sex play a role in how we engage with the sexes in general? Because if we're talking about power and domination in a relationship,
Mhm.
right now, because of the context of who we're talking about this week, let's talk in a heteronormative context, right? And the only reason
Mhm.
I say that is because of the people we're talking about. In a heteronormative context with a male and a female, how much does our biological inclinations play a part in the domination versus the non? And how much does the social engineering, the patriarchy, play a role in the dominating versus the non dominating role in the relationship? Does that make sense? And we can flesh it
Yeah.
out together. I'm saying, does the question make sense?
Yeah, and when I think that's a scary way to think about it, only because that's the argument people use against women, that they're
Yes.
not biologically, they're too emotional, they're this, they can't be leaders because they don't think logically and all that. They
Yeah.
get immediately kind of saying biologically men are set up this way. I think puts them. I don't think Bell Hooks actually talks about this. It gets them off the hook to do the work to think differently or even function differently. You can be born a male and not be patriarchal. You can still benefit from male privilege, but you can work actively to not use that male privilege and be an ally. And I'm using literal words as if I was white. I'm using white and black. But
Be born a
you
male and not be patriarchal. That's
yeah,
good. I like that. Okay, keep going. Yeah.
but like if we allow men to think, if we have the biological argument, that'll just give them the excuse of I feel all this rage inside. I feel rage too, and I was
Right.
socially engineered to control that.
Right. Fair.
So
Fair.
it
Fair.
very much so is still social, like,
Okay.
because you can't
Fair.
tell me that
Fair.
I'm not. You can't. Okay, here we go. You can't tell me that it's okay for men to be full of rage and anger and be able to use that to go fight wars. But then it's a problem when women are the angry black women, right?
But let me interject really quick, because
Hmm.
you're not wrong at all. And I think you're responding to that question in the context of abuse versus non. But I'm thinking right now, like if we took abuse off the shelf for a second, only because we're talking about patriarchy. But if we're talking about it, we be naturally wanting men to lead us, right? In a
Do we?
heteronormative context. Lead. No. Okay, let me be clear.
Is it natural or is it because of the country, the culture that we live in? Because there are matriarchal societies.
Yeah. No, it's not that. It's because everything
And it's
that I'm
not an
bringing up,
abuse of power though either. When I say matriarchal, I mean just woman led. I
yeah,
don't
yeah, I know
mean
what you're saying.
abuse.
Yeah, women are running.
No, not for just for you, for the listeners.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But what I'm saying is, you know that, okay, I'm going to talk really off the cuff for a second
Mhm.
and anecdotal, but I want to give light to this. I've seen like the videos about, you see those videos of girls like, when I'm with my man, my brain just turns off. Like it feels so
Yeah.
good. Like I love to just be with my man and my brain is just off. I don't be thinking, I must be getting hit by a car if it wasn't for, obviously she's being hyperbolic, but essentially saying
Mhm.
men just like when she be with her man, she feels so safe, protected, and like, woo, now I can release and be in this essence and energy, especially when you by a good man. I ain't even, let's take away abuse. If like a woman loved in a good relationship, be like, girl, I be barely thinking when I'm with my man. And then, but then contrarily though, you'll hear the guy be like, check all the doors. Did you check out? And maybe it's because I'm not a mom. I don't know, because I guess moms be like that. But it just, I've seen the differences. I can't speak to it scientifically at this moment, but I've seen the differences of our inclinations when we come together in a loving relationship,
Mhm.
personally and like in my friends and whatnot. And I don't want this to deviate too much from abuse, but I think since we're talking about patriarchy and how patriarchy creates a dominating culture versus a non one, or a dominating setting versus a non one, and we're saying that that is what creates the abuse, then how do we have the context of a relationship where we kind of naturally be gravitating to that, but it don't necessarily lead to abuse, or we don't necessarily have to call it patriarchy? Ooh, okay. I know that was, but does that make sense?
But that's what I'm saying is that it's not necessary. My argument. I'm not saying it is or it's not. I'm just saying my argument is that it's not necessarily biological. I'm
Okay.
saying
All
that it
right.
is social. Like, so that's just my argument is that it's still a social construct of what their role is. So they've learned how to be a protector, just like we've quote unquote learned how to nurture. But and I'm saying that because I have the ability to also be a protector, and
Yes.
men
Yeah.
have the ability to
Yeah.
also be nurturing. And I do honestly think that women, okay, I don't know what the theory is, I forget it, but basically it says that when you are the oppressed, you learn how to navigate your oppressor and you learn how to navigate up. I think it's kind of in that same vein is that black women know how to do the things. They know how to protect. They know how to navigate this system, this world that is not necessarily made up for them, just like black people know how to do it as well. Like, and I think that that's why it's probably easier for a woman to learn a more masculine role of
That's true.
protection or provider or I don't know. And it's also because it's less stigmatized because if you go down, it's like marrying down, right? A man doing the nurturing portion is the doing something that's beneath them, right? So it's harder for them to humble themselves to go under to do the thing that is not their thing than women because the characteristics of men are always weighted as higher. So it's easier for a woman to aspire for that, even with being like educated or going after degrees. She will be put down for that because she's not the man doing it. And men will be put down for doing the thing that is the pink job, which is like nursing and stuff like that, the pink collar jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I never heard that pink collar. I love that. I
Yeah,
literally have
pink
never heard
collar,
that
girl.
until right now. I've literally never heard that until right now. But you know what? Black women are the proof that that's not true. My point. And to be
Right,
clear, I wasn't saying it was true. I'm fleshing it out. We get into the
right.
nuance. So we do it in real time. So I wasn't saying it was true, but just for the audience. But black women are proof that it's not true,
Mhm.
because by all accounts and measures based off of the society and the societal structure and things that we've determined as masculine and non, black women are masculine.
And right, and do we not get put down for having the education and the being the protector and she kicked the man out the house and all the things?
And guess what? It was so we are that way solely from nurture and not nature, in the sense that society gave us a circumstance that we had to thus
Exactly.
respond to, and
Right.
whatever inclinations you want to say that women or men have, we had to push them down
Right.
because of the circumstances. We were nurtured into not fitting into the feminine archetype. if you're on the audio version, meaning, quote, I
quote
said
unquote.
archetype as if they didn't.
Right.
I did an air quotes. I just repeated it like, baby, no, you just double
That didn't
down.
help. But what you just said was super helpful because Black
Yeah,
women navigated the situation, right? Men, period, have never been in a circumstance where they had to navigate a super big wave of something, right?
yeah,
Where they've been in a position of oppression, right? As men. The feminist movement is because women rose up and said, I don't like this, right? All the
yeah,
waves of feminism was because the women rose up and said, men have never had to be in a position as a collective to have to rise up against something that they don't like because they are in power. And
in
this is
power
why, again,
position.
we compare it to race.
Racism. No, no, that's spot on. And so, you know what? All right. So, bringing it back around the first point, and we can pin this first point to this and say, so yeah,
This was good.
it was patriarchy don't work, pukas. And let me tell you why, my bros and women, because actually, again, we're all victims of it
Hmm.
because it necessitates dominance and also an exhausted man. Because, like you said,
Exactly.
that your man be stressed and overworked and keep his thoughts and his stress and stressors quiet, which then makes for an unhealthy partner, which makes for a partner who's incapable of pouring out. Because actually, ding, 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 I've heard this from guys presently as I've been having this
Hmm.
conversation. Like, man, you don't understand what a man go through. He got
What
to
did you
actually,
tell me?
you better say I'm always mocking. Because I'll be
But
ready.
I actually have a real conversation to this though. Like
No, I
within
do
the
it for you
last,
too. Go ahead. Go ahead.
we're not saying real, but like
Oh,
not
yeah.
saying yours wasn't real.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Relevant
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
that with me and Desmond that I literally would ask this man, "How are you doing?" every day. This man would say, "Same old ish."
Yep, yep,
And
yep,
I'm like, when he
yep,
finally got vulnerable about what it is that he goes through at work, I was like, he's like, "You thought it was a fun time?" And I was like, "Well, I never put two and two together." And immediately that shifted my mind to want to nurture him, care for him more. But I
yep,
can't do that if I am not aware, right? And men, like you said, bottle it up so much that it's like I can't talk about this
yep,
because you're told as a man that shut up, go to work, don't talk about you don't have feelings. You don't have feelings. This isn't actually bothering you. Whatever job you're on, it's not bothering you. You know what I'm saying?
yep.
So that if y'all don't get anything from this conversation is that patriarchy is abuse is harmful to especially the men in the conversation because
Yes,
you don't have the ability to be fully human. I think that's it
yes.
right there.
No,
Yeah.
that's it. Patriarchy strips you of humanity. And thus, because men are such brute strong, and I mean literally strong
Mhm,
creatures, they create societies. We all do, but I mean like they are pillars in their own right, in that they are literally
mhm,
gladiators. A man, when you can't twist something in a man, and I'm not saying this is, I'm just saying generally speaking, and a man come in and like, you ever been struggling with something and a man come in and do it with ease, you be like, damn, like, or like go to the gym, whatever. But anyway, saying that to say these big gladiator figures, when they're downtrodden, when they're
mhm,
emotionally harmed, that impacts the whole entire, in the same way when we're harmed, but it's different. Their impact when they're harmed impacts variables around them completely differently than how ours would when we're harmed. And so saying
mhm,
that to say, when a man is harmed, when a man is downtrodden, when a man is absent, all of that stuff, we feel it. And so saying that to say, because patriarchy strips you of your humanity, we literally can't even afford that, guys. We need y'all's presence for the very reason, because it really is a yin and yang, in the sense that
mhm,
we need one another to make a healthy, effective society. Like we really, really do. And so saying that to say, yeah, you're so right. Patriarchy strips you of humanity and thus robs the entire community. And not only robs, but necessitates abuse, which is what we're seeing play out. And final thought here really quick. I just want to circle it actually. The reason we took a different route towards this conversation is because this is what's the problem, guys. We've adopted patriarchy as the way
mhm,
of being, and then everything we label it something, when in actuality, it's all a remnant of patriarchy. And we've turned it into this buzzword that's like annoying and that we roll our
right,
eyes towards, but it's actually the word that's literally oppressing all of us, literally,
right.
and creating all of these remnants of abuse that we're all just going back and forth and labeling it this and that. And no, we all under the oppression of this silliness. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say well, you said something a long, long time ago, but it made me think about this. I've been thinking about Black men cannot afford to be patriarchal. We, as a people cannot afford that. And I was thinking about this because I seen a video or something about it that was basically like black people we 15 steps behind, right? And let's just put the homeowner situation on the forefront, right? Black men statistically, black women statistically, we make less money than our white counterparts, correct?
Right. Well, that's good. Yeah.
This idea of the man go to work and the woman stay at home, we literally cannot afford that as in
We
the
can't afford it.
black
We don't have
community,
no
right?
money. Look at the
We don't have
stats. We don't have
money.
no money.
We don't have money. So you think that your man is going to go to work and save 20% of a $200,000 investment property because you're trying to create generational wealth and you're going to sit at home and do nothing?
Morgan.
That's historically never been accurate for black women anyway. Black women have always worked. But like to put it in context, we just cannot afford it, right? We cannot afford to live in a structure that pits us. That's where the gender wars come from, right? It pits us against each other, and we cannot. I don't care about the white folk. Don't care. We cannot afford it. Like if you want to create generational wealth, you better start humbling yourself to have conversations with your partner, whoever your partner is,
Right.
so that
Right.
y'all can actually work through the racism that you are feeling on a daily basis outside of the house, right? Your house better become a sanctuary for y'all to come together, build each other up so that y'all can face the world. Like there is no use in like trying to will yourself over your partners, right? There's no if we think about the heteronormative thing, right? There's no use of a black man coming and trying to will himself over a black woman and trying to dominate her. It ain't gonna go well. And we're not gonna go far, right? So, like, if we just think about the money situation, in order for black people to survive, you're going to have to figure out the better dynamics. Patriarchy, it ain't gonna work for black people. It doesn't. It's not going to get us where we want to go. If you want to create generational wealth, you're not going to be able to do it. But also this, I do kind of get frustrated with black men sometimes because I'm like, y'all do know that y'all can imagine a world, right? Afrofuturism, right? You can imagine a world where you are at peace, where you are, different, right?
But
You don't have to, your standard doesn't have to be white men.
I don't think culturally they know that they can because the society has created narratives which then turned into feelings for them and then thus morphed into truths that they
Mhm,
subconsciously adapted that they are lesser, can't perform to the level of fill in the blank. And so
mhm,
they internalize that feeling and they feel it so deeply. And then the way it manifests is to the only people that they really have an unfettered continual access to.
mhm. Black women.
And so I'll give you a great analogy. You ever wake up out of a dream and then like let's say you're having a nightmare or something. The person you lay next to, so like you wake up you start you smack who you smacking? The person you lay in bed next to. What I think is happening, even in these conversations about the abuse that's been happening in the culture, like in the pop culture, y'all mad at a group that have actually been on your side. Y'all are taking your anger, frustration from a system that has disenfranchised you and
Right.
all of your wealth building opportunities. Well, relatively, because sometimes it's just a little bit of laziness. Y'all are mad that a system that messed y'all over, but you know that you don't have no power to actually fight that system directly. So then you just swinging haphazardly in
Mhm.
the air, and you just so happen to be hitting the person that's in the closest proximity to you.
Right.
That's what's
Literally.
happening. And guess what? That swinging sometimes is literally and figuratively. And black women, when we're like, there's a couple bruises on my arm and stuff, it's only because you woke up in the middle of the night swinging, and I've been like, swing. Do you know what I came in the house? The only reason I was swinging is because I had all this stuff. Oh, I know, but I'm saying, I'm not saying that the stuff outside not happening. I'm saying I just keep accidentally getting hit by the swing. And
Because
I'm
you're so
going really far with this analogy, but that's literally what's happening. Black women are just saying, you be waking up in the middle of the night hitting me a lot. Do you know what give me those nightmares? I get it. But I can't keep getting hit. That's what's happening right now. I swear to you, that's it.
Yeah, there is a black woman, I wanna say probably I mean, not Nikki Giovanni, but I feel like that's who it is. She was doing an interview and she was talking it probably ain't Nikki Giovanni. It's a black woman, and she was basically talking about how exactly what you just said, black men come home, you able to say, "Yes, master," all day long, and then I gotta get hit, physically, verbally, whatever, because you can't give me that same respect, right? Yeah. But
Yeah, go ahead, good, good. Because before we close it out, I do want to get to a
oh,
little
I'm
bit
not
of the
done.
nuances around. Okay, good, good, good. Because because I think so. The first and a half point is essentially patriarchy is bad and it strips us of humanity, all of us, and it robs us of our love experiences. And that's a part of why we're seeing so much rampant abuse because we all resonate with patriarchy either negatively or positively or otherwise in this. But the second part that I wanted to get to is this stuff that we're seeing play out is a remnant of patriarchy, and
Mhm.
also it is our lack of knowledge. We don't
Exactly.
know. We don't have knowledge around what is abuse. And I'm talking about we male and like all of us. All of us struggle vehemently in the area of naming what is abusive, what is not, what is normal, what is not normal. And even if
Mhm.
we've normalized it, there is a difference between we've normalized something and it
Right.
being normal and appropriate. Normal and
Right.
appropriate don't mean the same thing. Just
Mhm.
because it feels normal don't mean it's appropriate, Puka. Like I don't care
Right.
how much you try and convince someone that look hit every now and then. Oh, we be wrestling.
Yeah.
Anybody putting their hands on you, anybody. Oh, tell y'all can say what you want, but when the heat of the moment, I'm not buying it.
Mm-mm.
And that's just one little example. So my point is, can we please, and we're gonna rely on Morgan's expertise here, but like, can we please just kind of give some language to our ignorance in this area?
Yeah, and I think you even with that conversation, even what you just saying, normal versus normalized, like people sometimes you grow up in a house where you see an abuse and you think, "Oh, that's normal." And that was normalized in your but when you grow up and you're like, "Oh shoot, that was not normal. That was not okay." Like that's the difference between being normal and normalized, right? I believe black men and black women do not benefit from patriarchy and we have to imagine futures. I cannot wait to move into our house so that we can imagine for our future, right? You have a lineage, right? Can we imagine what it is that you want? And if some of the things are I go out and I make the money, please have the reasoning to back that up, right? What's the value of that? What are the values of your family? Because you don't have to go along with the culture, right? You can if your family is going to be emotionally intelligent, why are we going to be emotionally intelligent? You know, because we all want to be whole humans and we all want to have space to value our feelings, right? So value dot 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 the reasoning. Anyway, so when we were talking in our voice notes about the in our pre-production about this, I was saying that all these examples of what we're seeing right now is just is the result of not teaching us what abuse is, but also what healthy relationships look like and how to have them. And I think in having healthy relationships, there has to be a removing of gender roles and the removing of
Oh, this might
the
be really good
bipartisan patriarchy.
episode. Yeah, no, yeah, let's go. Let's teach us, daughter.
Because in order for you to have healthy relationships and communication, healthy relationships, you have to have elements like communication. And with communication, you have to have maybe I feel statements. I insert feeling, right? And it's when you have a both two parties having conversations where they're talking about their feelings, actual feelings, anger, frustration, jealousy, insert like look up the wheel of feelings. You have to, and you have that conversation of like compromise and things. Automatically, that whole idea of like a man being able to say my way or the highway, that is out the door when you want to have a healthy relationship. That's an example of how patriarchy doesn't function in healthy relationships. There has to be a giving up of something, and patriarchy will teach you that I'm the man, I don't give up nothing, you do what I say, right? And I also wanted to talk about how this is what we was talking about our pre-production is the Meg the Stallion situation. So allegedly, Kelsey is the one who shot Meg the Stallion, right? And we're thinking, oh my gosh, how might that be likely? Extremely, right? This ain't nothing but a high school, and I'm not saying that this is a high school drama thing, but it's an example of like a boy slept with a cheerleader. He slept with three different people in three different groups, and he didn't maybe think they was all gonna find out, right? Or they didn't think that they were going to find out. And two best friends. My boss literally wrote an article about a girl in Detroit killed another girl in high school. And I said high school because of this. These three people were in high school. One girl killed the girl in her class because they either liked or had sex with the same guy. And this is results of us not teaching. This is the results of us not having conversation about what jealousy feels like, what betrayal feels like, what that's my man. I'm gonna go after, like, I'm gonna go after whoever. There are so many things that we could have taught against this to not lead us to here. And there has to be conversations about healthy relationships. And I think that's why organizations that I work that I'm a part of are so important and that I'm in connection with are so important, because we do education around these things because of this, because we don't know what abuse looks like. We don't know what, again, healthy relationships look like. Part of my job also is teaching media literacy. Media, we, podcasts, TV shows. When you have people behind a mic who don't know what they're talking about, or you have people producing shows that don't know what they're talking about, they create our worlds and end up shaping our culture. And we start thinking that I'm gonna use sexual violence as in Law and Order as the example of this. We often don't know what sexual violence look like, because when we watch Law and Order, I know some people that just watch, I binge SVU. That is not what sexual violence looks like on a daily basis. Sexual violence is the, forget the like coercion of like Diddy and all that. That's obviously, that's getting extreme, and we can kind of see that, and it's like that's not okay. Sexual violence is also groping and somebody walking past you at a college party and grabbing your butt. But we've just kind of normalized that as boys being boys, are like, oops, he didn't mean to do that, or I didn't feel that violated because it wasn't like he touched my pants, like he didn't go under my skirt or nothing like that. And I've heard that happen to girls. And because the man didn't actually penetrate her, that wasn't sexual violence, right? But what we view as sexual violence has been skewed. So we don't often think that X, Y, and Z is sexual violence, and there's like a levels to it. It's not. All of it is sexual violence. So the same thing with abuse and like domestic violence and interpersonal violence. That's why we think about the power and control wheel that has, I'm gonna just name all the things on here. It says use of coercion and threats, using
I'll
intimidation.
post it too.
Yeah. Using emotional abuse, using isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, abusing children, use of male well, actually, use of children. So, like when you have dynamics where you have children together, keeping the child away from the partner, things like that, using male privilege, using economic abuse.
No, I appreciate you naming that. And like I said, I'm going to post the wheel there because I think it will help us to give further nuance in our own brains, not even just in this conversation, but after this conversation. And I just want to personally acknowledge some things to really give credence to how real this stuff is. I didn't struggle believing any of these women that came out this week. Let's be very clear. However, when I heard more and more arguments around, well, why they couldn't be telling the truth, or why this is not true, and just the nonsense, it started to make me reflect on my own situations and my own experiences. And I can't tell you how many times I've been like out of relationships where my ex or my previous partner came up to my house when I wasn't there. Sitting outside watching stuff. And because I was so heightened and accustomed to that level of toxicity, it just used to be like, oh, he get on my nerves.
Right.
Or even like I've been in relationships with money dynamics and how difficult it would be for me to speak up about things that I wanted because I was so fearful of losing that money or losing access to that money or losing access to this person. It was just so, it's been, my point is I can go on and on around so many experiences that I've had in relationships that have inadvertently stripped me of power. And this is where it gets complex. It's not even that the guy, don't get me wrong, in some of these instances that I can name, the guy was absolutely trash and toxic. And I think they knew they were being toxic and didn't care. That's absolutely some instances. And also, it's so complex and nuanced that I think there are instances of abuse where both parties don't know, the perpetrator or the victimized or the person who is being tormented by the perpetrator, because I don't really like the word victim. Neither parties really know how tragic and problematic and toxic the behavior is, because toxicity in abusive situations sometimes is so covert and it's so chaotic and messy. So these are all the more reasons why I need to have these conversations. Not because, again, I know people roll their eyes and get exhausted by it because, oh, everybody want to be a victim now. No, because if we don't really lay out and do it in a fine-tuned way, or go through these conversations and these experiences with a fine-tooth comb, then we run the risk of them escalating to the consistent stuff that we've seen this week. All the three stories
Right.
that we've
Right.
seen this week. Going through with the fine-tooth comb prevents it from getting to and now he's locked up because one night and then they started swinging. You don't wake
Right.
up one day and start swinging. Some instances fair, somebody just wake up and swing, but no, he was outside my house a couple of times.
Right.
When I
Steps before the physical.
absolutely. And so what I'm saying is the reason I brought up personal stuff is because as I was
Mhm.
reviewing it, I think the Lord that I had the wherewithal. Oh, I want to mention that too. I think the Lord I had the wherewithal to leave at some points, but also even when I've left and not like, I'm like, oh, I was in some crazy abusive things. And that speaks to my last point. And I'd love your thoughts here, Morgan. Where is the line of, I want to talk directly to women now.
Mhm.
Because in the same way we're saying we need knowledge and tools, the lack of confidence that we go into relationships with women, I'm saying right now, I'm just specifically speaking to women. I think lack of confidence in men often is what makes them perpetuate abuse a lot of times too, but this ain't a male podcast. So right now I'm just talking to women for a second. We really got to have a conversation around agency, because if we don't, and if we don't learn our agency, this is not victim blaming even in the slightest, so don't even, I might not even need to put that in there, but I'm gonna put this in there just in case what I'm about to say sounds bad. I want us to learn agency so that the fear that we feel sometimes about speaking up, we feel the power to push back sooner. Because as I was reviewing my situations, some that were like purposefully abusive by the guy, and then some I'm thinking like, oh, he didn't even know how toxic and trash he was being, because that's just the norms. We need to
Mhm.
learn what's not normal so that we can so we know that we do have the agency. Because in some of these instances I'm like, shoot, we felt victimized but didn't even want to say it because we were fearful of, never mind, it's gonna get too messy. I'm trying to
No, no,
figure
no.
out whether, yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
It was sounding almost victim blaming, but I do hear almost what you're saying. So, especially the part where you're saying like he didn't even know, because there was I seen this TikTok and it was like we throw this narcissism word around a lot, and then we also like, but what if that's the only way they were taught how to love? So, same vein of these like men are only taught a particular way to live and function and love, right? Or show their love and think that that's love. And I think where the victim blaming was about to come was like we us knowing when to leave. I think we don't know when to speak up and when to leave because we don't know what is abuse. And I think you said
Right,
that. So it's like
right.
that's where the education comes in,
You're right.
that
What is abuse?
and
Yeah, you're
and
right.
but the same thing with the sexual violence. Men, and again, heteronormative language, men are taught to be a certain way. The pursuer is so there's a if you're pursuing and pursuing and pursuing, that can easily turn into coercion, right?
Yeah.
So like we have to do some education of what is healthy and what is not. But also I think there has to be, and part of education is also sharing resources. You should know, I mean, probably no, because I'm in this world and because I've like love wellness. You should, when you move into a new city or you live in your city, you should know where your resources are. You should know where because one way of abusing somebody is isolating them from community. So if they don't feel like they have resources, if they don't know that they have help somewhere, that makes it even harder to leave, right? It makes it even harder for them to be able to have a conversation like, I don't know if this was abuse or not, or I don't know, not even abuse, because people don't want to put their word out, but I don't know if this was okay, right?
Yeah.
So knowing your resources and being in community, I think also helps a lot with situations like this. But when people know that they are abusing power, they are doing purposeful
Right.
isolation. But I do hear what you're saying, because I think it just speaks to the fact that the patriarchy, the abuse pipeline, like we we are all taught a certain way to function in this society.
Yes. I'm
And I think
sorry.
that's why
Yes.
we are
Yes. Go ahead, keep going.
I, my role as an educator is that important, because we have no clue what we doing out here.
Yeah, can I just, what just resonated with me? Yes, it's the last final part. You don't know, how can I know to have confidence when patriarchy told me to subdue myself?
Exactly.
We feel
But
confident.
also,
Yeah, go ahead.
but think about it on the reverse, right? He's like, that's the line too. So you're trying to, on the reverse end, navigate. Well, he's just being the provider. He told you not to go to work. You know what I'm saying? Like, now he's got control over all the finances. Well, he's being the provider. So that psychological, like, oh my God, the mental gymnastics that you have to do to try to even figure out, is he abusing power or is he just being my protector and my provider?
Can I, because that, yeah, yes, let's put the pin there. And my personal one that I'm thinking about is
Mm-hmm.
part two. And now, seriously, we got it up part two. Because we're gonna get into this past the white wife thing, but
Actually, let that be tomorrow for real. I will watch the video and we can talk about
perfect, yeah, because this is a part of that, so it just got to be a part of it, but probably its own thing. Because the one I'm thinking about, one day I'll tell the story,
that.
but very much, God is gonna fix him, and men are oriented toward that in this early stage, and so I just have to rest and endure and I will say this, to be fair to me and even the what things that I've learned, I was never in a state of God has ordained this
Right.
abuse. I was in the state of what can God produce from this pain that I'm experiencing from this abuse. Still just as trash.
Mhm.
But
Right.
but even that, I say that in the context of patriarchy because even that is a remnant of patriarchy in that I know Puka, but I'm so sorry to be acknowledging this silliness. But even that is a remnant of patriarchy I'm hearing from you because it has forced me into a frame of mind that says, woman,
Mhm.
endure because the
Mm.
prize comes with endure. Oftentimes endure isn't like endure is a synonymous with the men in our lives. So patriarchy makes it almost tailors me to be ready to deal with whatever this man will force me to endure. And then you put
Mhm.
God on top of that endurance piece. And it's like, all right, you literally become the bottom of a funnel. Woo! I'm not kidding. I'm literally because I'm very analogous. If you can't tell, the funnel just becomes like, all right, we finna sit this thing on top. You ready? Now I'm finna pour the crap in. And what patriarchy has done is like prepared me to fit myself into that little
Mhm.
hole
Oh
so
my
that
god.
it'll go perfectly down. And I'm just sitting here
Wow.
under all this subjugation and
Digest.
oppression for the sake of whatever the fuck. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the scripture, like when you add in, because the religious piece, like with the part two tomorrow,
Part to
the
tomorrow.
adding the scripture adding the scripture to that of wives, not even the wives obey your husband, but the whatever church Paul told them to wives pray for your husband's salvation. Like I know that's the scripture, and being
Yeah.
so immediately being able to like again now I have to pray for my man's whole salvation. So it's like you already put you as a woman again into a situation where you have to endure something. Like you have to be the intercessor for the man.
Yep.
You have to be the intercessor to this for this man to God. Go ahead. What you finna say?
No, because I do believe that there is some element of, but I'm also a creationist though. Like meaning my theology is based in creationism and I'm not ashamed of that because I think Genesis 3 gives us a framework for why we have so much strife in the male female relationship. So it's not I know oftentimes when people say they're creationists, I promise this is getting to a point. Well, oftentimes when people say they believe in the Adam and Eve story and what happened in Genesis, then that
Mhm.
kind of necessitates idiocy a little bit, ignorance about some stuff, and also when people say that they hear gendered trash that they've heard about Eve and all that, I don't subscribe necessarily to that. I do subscribe to which we've talked a little bit about how I think patriarchy is a result of sin, not that patriarchy was inducted into the way that we were supposed to be. I think
Mhm.
we failed and then patriarchy became a thing. So saying that to say, because I believe when God made male and female, I do think that he did create an essence for how we engaged with one another that made some elements of us being able to complement each other really, really well, which what that means into context of what you were saying is that I actually do think there is a level of women having a level of power and influence and like power influence spiritually and like softness even that can change a
Mhm.
man. I really do believe that. To
Yeah.
what extent, I mean, I think that's what I'm still fleshing out, and I'm that's kind of what I'm writing that book about. I told you about Genesis, but I just can't say I don't necessarily fully believe that. I don't know, but I know that was super unbaked. But I'm not pushing back on you. I'm saying I'm not completely against that. I just